Lewis Hamilton just put a Ferrari on pole at Silverstone, and he did it by 11 thousandths of a second. 11 thousandths. Over a Mercedes driver who has led the championship all year while Hamilton sat stuck in the midfield. On paper, this shouldn't have happened. The Ferrari isn't the fastest car here. Hamilton hasn't been the fastest driver here, but when the timing screens locked in on Friday, his name sat on top of them, and the data behind that lap tells a story nobody expected. Friday afternoon, Silverstone. The sprint session that sets the grid is done, and the number on the board next to Hamilton's name is a 128,376. Next to Kimi Antonelli's name, a 128,387. 11 thousandths of a second between first and second. Blink, and you miss it. If you lined the two laps up and played them together, your eyes would tell you they were the same lap run twice. But the surface is lying to you. Because the moment you stop looking at the leaderboard and start looking at how the lap was actually built, the pole makes no sense at all. Hamilton is fastest overall, and yet, when you cut his lap into pieces, he is not fastest anywhere. Not in the opening part of the track, not in the middle. And not through the long, fast sweeps this circuit is famous for. Every individual chunk of the lap has someone else's name sitting on top of it, and still, the combined time comes out in front. That is not how pole positions usually work. Pole normally goes to the driver who is quickest, somewhere obvious, who has one clear strength he leans on and rides to the front. Maybe a car that flies down the straights. Hamilton's lap has no headline. It has something quieter, something you only see when you lay his data on top of Antonelli's and watch the exact point where the two cars stop being equal. So let's take the pole lap apart and find the 11 thousandths. Two cars, two laps, almost identical stopwatch time. Both cars hit the first braking zone at the same moment. Both roll through the early corners locked together, close enough to trace one line over the other. Through the quick direction changes that come next, still level. If anything, the Mercedes looks slightly happier in the fast stuff, a touch more planted. And that matches everything we already know about this season. The driver on the other end of this fight has been leading the standings while Hamilton scrapped in the pack. Everything points to Antonelli taking this pole. The form points to it, the car points to it, so does the championship table. And for most of the lap, the data agrees, because for most of the lap, Antonelli is genuinely the quicker man. If the lap ended 2/3 of the way around, this is his pole, comfortably, and we are having a very different conversation. Then, they reach Village. Village is the tight left that folds the lap back on itself, turns 3 and 4, the part of Silverstone where the track stops flowing, and forces a driver to slow the car right down, rotate it, and fire it back out toward the next straight. It is not a corner that shows up in highlight reels. What it is slow, awkward, tighter than it looks on television, and very easy to get slightly wrong. And it is the exact place where Hamilton's entire pole was made. Watch the two laps here, side by side, and the gap that did not exist for the whole lap suddenly appears out of nowhere. Hamilton gets the Ferrari slowed, turned, and back to full throttle, a fraction earlier than Antonelli manages in the Mercedes, by the kind of margin you cannot see with the naked eye. But that fraction, gained right at the exit of a slow corner, does not stay in the corner. Every meter of track after that point, Hamilton is travelling a hair faster because he left the corner a hair faster. And a hair faster, stretched all the way to the line, adds up to exactly the 11 thousandths that put him on pole. That is the whole trick. That is the entire margin. One corner nobody talks about, driven better than anyone else on the grid, drove it, on a lap that was otherwise second best. The time you gain in a slow corner doesn't show up in it. It shows up everywhere after it. It compounds. It rolls forward through every corner and every straight that comes next, quietly stacking up until it crosses the line as a number on a screen. The corner is where the time is made. The rest of the lap is just where it gets counted. Think about how thin that is. He topped no sector. He set no top speed anyone bothered to screenshot. Across most of the circuit, he was outpaced by the man sitting right behind him on the grid. And he still walked away with the number 1 on the board, because he found a couple of hundredths in the one place everybody else was leaving them on the table. But this is not a fluke. A fluke is a lucky toe down the straight, a gust of wind at the right moment, a rival running wide and gifting you the time. None of that is what happened here. This is a driver taking the one section of track where car performance matters least and pure driver skill matters most, and simply doing it better than everyone else in the field. Because Village doesn't reward horsepower. It doesn't reward downforce the way the fast corners do, where the car with more grip in high speed just carries more speed and there is little the driver can do about it. Village rewards feel. It rewards a driver who can sense the precise moment the car will accept the throttle again on the way out and take it a fraction before everyone else dares to. Too early and the car slides wide and you lose everything you gained. Too late and you have left time on the road. The window is tiny, and hitting it perfectly, lap after lap, is one of the hardest things a driver does. That is the oldest thing Lewis Hamilton has. Long before the 7 titles, long before the move to Ferrari, that was the thing that set him apart. The ability to find lap time in the exact places the datasheet says there shouldn't be any. And on Friday at Silverstone, in a car that has spent the whole season a clear step behind the front, that old instinct dragged a pole out of nothing. And that is only the first half of what makes this lap remarkable. Because a pole is never just a pole. It is a snapshot of where everyone stands, and this snapshot is deeply strange when you hold it up against everything that came before it this year. Rewind to where this season has actually been sitting. Kimi Antonelli, the young Mercedes driver, has been leading the World Championship. Not fighting for the lead, leading it outright. He came into this weekend as the man everyone else is chasing. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, has spent 2026 in the midfield, a long way from the title picture, in a Ferrari that keeps promising more on Saturday than it delivers on Sunday. For a man used to fighting at the very front, a season spent in the pack is a slow grind. And the easy story, the one a lot of people had already settled on, was that the certainty that made him great was gone for good. So the natural order of this weekend was simple. Antonelli at the front, where he has been all year. Hamilton somewhere behind, fighting for the scraps that are left. That is what the entire season had trained everyone to expect. Instead, the midfield driver put his car in front of the championship leader by 11 thousandths. At the championship leader's direct expense, and he did it not with a faster car, but by outdriving the man in one corner. You'd think someone would have called that outcome before the session started. Nobody did. Nobody had Hamilton on pole at this track. And that is exactly why the data behind it matters so much more than the result on its own. If he had bolted a huge upgrade onto the car and blasted the field by half a second, we would all shrug and say the car finally got quick. That's not what happened. The car did not suddenly find half a second. The margin is 11 thousandths, and every bit of it came from the driver, in the one place the car had the least to do with the outcome. When a pole comes from the car, it tells you the machine got quicker, and machines can be copied, matched, caught next week. When a pole comes from one slow corner, driven on feel, it tells you the driver still has the thing that made him great, even when the machine underneath him doesn't. One of those things the rest of the grid can develop their way past. The other, they can't. And there is a second layer to this. Look at the actual lap time again. A 1:28, 376. Now hold that number up next to the pole time that took this same Silverstone a year ago, and something jumps out that has nothing to do with Hamilton at all. This year's pole is 3.484 seconds slower than last year's. 3.5 seconds around a single lap on the same track. That is an enormous swing. The cars are slower this season. This new generation of machinery leans far harder on managing energy across a lap than the cars that came before it, and the lap times have paid the price. What used to be a pure flat-out qualifying blast has become a more careful, more calculated exercise, where a driver has to manage the car through some parts of the lap to have everything available in the parts that count. If this corner-by-corner breakdown is your kind of thing, take a second and subscribe. This channel pulls apart the moments the broadcast skips every race weekend. That's the whole promise. So, slower cars, a tighter field, 3.5 seconds pulled clean out of the lap. What all of that does to a driver like Hamilton is where this really turns. Raw power counts for a little less, and precision counts for a little more. A slower, trickier car punishes the drivers who lean on the machine to do the work, and rewards the ones who can extract that last hidden fraction by hand. The gap between the best cars and the rest shrinks. And into that shrinking gap steps the one driver who can reliably find time where the data says there is none left to find. That is why 11 thousandths in Village is not a footnote to be skipped past. In this era, in these cars, on a margin this fine, one corner driven perfectly is the entire difference between pole and second. He didn't need the fastest car. He needed the one corner nobody else on the grid was truly nailing, and he went and took it. And if that is true here, at one track on one Friday, then it is true everywhere the rest of the way. Every circuit left on the calendar has its own version of Village. Those corners are where whole weekends are going to be decided. which means the drivers who have spent a career learning to squeeze time out of the awkward places just quietly became the most valuable men in the sport. Hamilton is very much on that list. Friday was the reminder. A few months from now, when people look back on this season, this might just be the lap they point to, as the moment the old master reminded everyone exactly what he still has in his hands. Because the timing of this particular pole could not be more loaded. Ferrari have already confirmed that Hamilton stays with them into 2027. The partnership that so many people had quietly written off after a long, difficult run of races is not ending. And that decision suddenly looks a great deal smarter, with a Silverstone pole sitting right next to it, taken off the championship leader, in front of a home crowd that has watched Hamilton win at this track more times than they can count. Think about what a lap like this does for a team that has spent most of the year under a cloud. Every hard weekend, every Sunday where the Ferrari quietly faded backwards, fed the exact same story. That the whole move was a mistake, that the partnership had already peaked, and that the car was never going to give Hamilton the platform he actually needed to fight at the front. And then, on an ordinary Friday afternoon, all of that noise gets answered by a single lap that puts the red car on top of the timing screen. Through the driver they chose to build the whole project around, doing precisely the thing they signed him to do. It doesn't fix the season. One pole doesn't erase months spent grinding through the midfield, but it changes the conversation completely. It hands Ferrari something they have not had in a long time, which is hard proof, right there on the timing screen, that the ceiling of this project is far higher than the results so far have made it look. And it lands in the one place on the calendar where it hits hardest. This is home for Hamilton, and the grandstands were on their feet before the session even ended. A Hamilton who believes he still has it is a very different problem for the rest of the grid than a Hamilton who is only hoping. So what does this pole actually set up from here? Because this is a sprint weekend, and the lap he just produced is not for the main Grand Prix. It sets the grid for the sprint, the shorter race that runs first. Which means Hamilton starts this one from the very front, with clear air ahead of him and the championship leader sitting right there in his mirrors, at a track he knows better than almost anyone who has ever driven it. And starting first here matters more than it might at a lot of other circuits. Clean air at the front lets a driver control the pace and dictate terms to everyone behind him. Antonelli, lining up second, now has to find a way past a Hamilton who is not going to make life easy for him. On a circuit this fast, where getting close enough to make a move is hard and getting past is harder still. Pole gives Hamilton the inside line into the opening braking zone and the right to pick where the pack goes. Hold the lead through the first lap, keep the Mercedes just out of range, and he gets to run his own race from there. Lose the start, drop back into the churn, and all of that Friday work evaporates in about 8 seconds. A front row start is worth an enormous amount here. It is also the most fragile lead in the sport, because it lasts exactly until the moment the lights go out. Then the Grand Prix itself still looms after that. The way a sprint weekend flows, the short race and the sessions around it feed straight into the mood and the confidence heading into Sunday. Momentum is a real force in this sport, and Hamilton just handed himself a huge dose of it at the best possible moment in front of the best possible crowd. There is a version of this weekend where that pole is the high point, and reality bites hard the moment the racing gets long. The Ferrari's season-long problems do not simply vanish because of one perfect lap. The Mercedes lining up behind him is still, on balance, the stronger car over a full race distance. Antonelli is still leading this championship. All of that is true, and every bit of it will be pushing back against him the second the lights go out. But there is another version too. One where the driver who just proved he can still find time nobody else on the grid can find, takes that clear track in front of him and turns 11 thousandths into something that actually shows up when it counts on Sunday. Where the pole is just the opening line of the weekend, with the best of it still to come. Where it becomes the moment that reminds the entire paddock exactly why Ferrari bet on this man in the first place. Which version we end up getting, we only find out on track. What we already know for certain is this. On a Friday afternoon at Silverstone, in a car that had no real business being anywhere near the front, Lewis Hamilton found his entire winning margin inside a single slow corner that the rest of the grid drove worse than he did. The timing sheet only ever shows you the 11 thousandths. The data shows you exactly where they came from, and where they came from is the one thing a slower car and a harder season have not been able to take away from him. This is bigger than a single Friday result. The drivers who keep winning are going to be the ones who can wring that last hidden fraction out by feel, corner by corner, in the places the machine simply cannot help them. That is the shift this one pole quietly points to. And the man who just proved it better than anyone is the same one a lot of people had already decided to write off for good. The race is next. The championship leader is right behind him, and for once this season, Lewis Hamilton is the one that everybody else has to catch.